My name is Sarah, and what if the one place that held your soul was sold like scrap metal, without your consent, without your goodbye? When I stepped off that plane, jet-lagged but determined, I believed I was coming home to honor my grandmother's dying wish. Instead, I found a cold reality: bulldozers revving, contracts signed, and my family's legacy listed as a teardown. But the past doesn't stay buried, especially when it has roots. A letter from the grave, a garden never meant to die, and a woman not ready to let go without a fight. I hadn't even unpacked my suitcase when Mom dropped the bomb. The house is gone, Sarah. Sold. Weeks ago. At first, I thought she was joking, some cruel attempt at sarcasm wrapped in the usual sharpness that seasoned our conversations. But when she avoided my eyes and fiddled with the edge of her coffee cup like it might explain itself, I knew she meant it. Gone. Grandma Eloise's house, the one with the ivy-draped porch swing where I read my first book, the creaky hallway that sang me to sleep every summer, the attic stuffed with dusty trunks and half-told stories, sold. Like a pair of shoes that no longer fit. I swallowed the rising sting in my throat. You promised me you'd wait. No, Mom said with the kind of voice that tried to sound firm but collapsed halfway. You promised her. I never agreed to that. It had been barely 4 weeks since Grandma passed. I'd been in Spain, finishing my grad fellowship in historical architecture, rushing through final interviews, scribbling notes in the margins of old manuscripts, but always with the thought that I'd return and make things right. Grandma's voice echoed in every late-night call. When you get back, we'll start, Sarah. That garden still remembers your name. And now? All of it. Her home, her legacy, the garden with the weeping cherry tree that bloomed every April like it was mourning something, was in the hands of a developer. Some faceless company promising, quote, modern luxury and urban efficiency, probably unaware that the soil held generations of secrets. Dad hadn't even looked up from his laptop. Sweetheart, it wasn't safe anymore. Termites, roof leaks, insurance headaches. But that wasn't the point. Grandma had left me a mission, her last wish, whispered between morphine dreams and soft tears. She wanted the house restored, not replaced. She believed history had roots, and ours ran deep through every beam and floorboard. And I'd come home to fulfill that. I sat on the guest bed that night, still jet-lagged, my fingers brushing the photo I always kept in my journal. Me at 10, in overalls, barefoot in the garden, dirt-smudged and beaming beside Grandma. Her hand rested gently on my shoulder. I looked like I belonged. Back then, she was the only one who saw me. Not as a weird kid or too sensitive, or the girl who spent more time drawing floor plans of treehouses than playing with dolls. She saw something worth watering. Maybe that's why losing the house felt like being erased. And the worst part? No one even told me. I stared out the window into the shadowed night, heart heavy with the weight of the unspoken. The kitchen light clicked off. Silence filled the space between what should have been shared. I came home to rebuild. But now, I didn't even know where to begin. What would you do if the last person who believed in you was gone, and the one thing she left behind was sold off behind your back? Sometimes, it takes losing everything to understand what you're really fighting for. The next morning began with quiet footsteps and the bitter smell of overbrewed coffee. Mom was already in the kitchen, dressed like she'd been up for hours, tapping her phone with that pinched expression she wore whenever she had something to defend but didn't want to. I hadn't slept much. Jet lag, grief, and the fury twisting in my chest made sure of that. You knew what that house meant to me, I said, breaking the silence that had taken over the room. Mom didn't look up. It was falling apart, Sarah. You didn't see it the last few months. The mold, the plumbing, she was living in the past. We had to be practical. Then why didn't you tell me? My voice cracked, and I hated how small it made me sound. She finally looked at me, her eyes tired, not angry. Because you would have come running, throwing yourself into another emotional project. We were already handling the hospital bills, the funeral, the estate, and you were busy chasing history in Spain. I blinked. Chasing history? She was our history. She was your grandmother, she said quietly. But she was my mother. And you think I haven't lost something too? That stunned me silent. For a second, I saw past the calculated explanations. and caught something raw, grief hiding beneath practicality. But then her voice shifted again, firming like concrete. We sold it to Evergreen Developments. It was the best offer, and the only one that took it as is. They're tearing it down next week. Some upscale condos, I think, close to downtown. It's already finalized. A cold rush spread through me. She asked me to keep the garden. She said it was the heart of the house. You knew that. She said a lot of things before she passed, Sarah. But sentiment isn't survival. You can't build a life on old wood and memories. I stared at her like she'd become a stranger. Grandma had been the emotional glue between us. With her gone, the cracks were showing fast. I need to see it, I said, my voice shaking. I need to say goodbye. She didn't stop me, just went back to her phone like it was easier to lose me to the cold than face what was broken between us. The house sat on Sycamore Street, an old, quiet lane lined with trees that looked tired from holding so many memories. The moment I saw the chain-link fencing and the plastic permit signs slapped onto the mailbox, something inside me snapped. The garden was still there, wild and overgrown, but familiar. The cherry tree stood tall in the middle, its branches rustling in the morning breeze like it remembered me. The air smelled like rain and rosemary. The porch creaked as I stepped onto it, as if the house was sighing under my weight. Windows were boarded, the door was padlocked, and a bright red notice warned trespassers with bold capital letters. Demolition scheduled. 3 days. 3 days. I sank to the porch steps, blinking against the sun, my fingers clutching the edge of the wood like it could anchor me to something real. The world blurred around the edges. This place wasn't just a house, it was the map of who I had been. My first sketchbook lay buried in the back closet, my initials carved into the oak tree out back. My childhood in every cracked tile and creaky stair. And now, it was just a number in a demolition queue, a memory at war with progress. I closed my eyes and let the silence fill me. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. There had to be something, anything, that could still be done. Because a promise is a promise. And I'd promised her I wouldn't let this place die. The envelope was thin, aged cream, with faded gold trim and my name written in the careful cursive that only one person ever used. Grandma's handwriting. It arrived that evening, tucked between grocery store flyers and a credit card offer, like it hadn't been lost or delayed, just waiting. My hands trembled as I turned it over, breath catching in my throat at the return address. E. Waverly, 106, Sycamore Street. She had sent it from the house. I stood frozen in the hallway for a moment before peeling it open like it might shatter. Inside was a single folded sheet, no date, just her words, slanted with age and urgency. My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, it means the timing has failed me, but not, I hope, the purpose. This house is yours. It always was. I've drawn up papers with Mr. Lamont, the old attorney you liked who smells like lemons and always wears that bow tie with the mustard stain. He has the deed, signed, with your name on it. If anyone challenges it, remind them I was still of sound mind. Heaven knows I made enough noise about it. But most of all, sweetheart, you must protect the garden. That patch of land holds our family's memory in ways a ledger never could. Your grandfather planted that cherry tree the day you were born. That rosemary bush by the gate? Your mother brought that home when she was pregnant with you. I've tended those roots like I tended yours, with stubborn love. Promise me you won't let them tear it apart. Not just for me, for you. Love always, Grandma Eloise. I sat on the edge of the guest bed, her letter resting in my lap, heartbeat loud in my ears. All this time, I thought she only meant for me to carry the memory. I didn't realize she'd given me the right, a legal inheritance, and no one had said a word. I searched online for Mr. Lamont Attorney Sycamore area, and there he was, Lamont and Dean, Elder Law Services. I called immediately, praying someone would pick up, even though it was past business hours. A crackling voice answered. Hello? Mr. Lamont? Yes? It's Sarah Waverly, Eloise's granddaughter. A pause. Ah, I was wondering when you'd call. My breath caught. You have something for me, don't you? I've had it for weeks. a hand-signed deed, and her last letter of instruction. I was told to wait until June 10th to mail it if I hadn't heard from you. That was yesterday. The envelope, the date. She gave me the house? Yes, in full. She made it quite clear. I stared at the wall, heart pounding. But they already sold it. That complicates things. But if the deed predates the sale, and it does, it could invalidate the transaction, especially if it wasn't disclosed. A wave of adrenaline surged through me, my hands curled into fists. She had protected me, even when she knew time was running short. Can you email me a scanned copy of the deed? I'll do one better, he said, voice warming. I'll bring it to you tomorrow morning. After hanging up, I held her letter to my chest, hot tears slipping down my cheeks. 3 days. That's all I had. But now, I wasn't just some grieving granddaughter clinging to the past. I had rights. And a promise. Tomorrow, I'd return to the house, and I wouldn't be leaving. I didn't pack a bag. Just grabbed my coat, a flashlight, the thick file Mr. Lamont had handed me that morning, and the folded lawn chair from the garage. The house looked smaller at night, boxed in by construction tape and silence. The street lamps flickered. An empty soda can rattled across the sidewalk like a warning. But I didn't hesitate. I pushed open the flimsy construction fence, careful not to tear my coat, and stepped into the yard like I belonged. Because, legally now, I did. The garden was quieter than I remembered. Weeds had overtaken the gravel path, and the once proud rose bushes were tangled in disarray. But the cherry tree stood like a sentinel in the dark, petals from last bloom still curled in its roots. I moved slowly, flashlight scanning over forgotten planters, broken pottery, and the outline of Grandma's herb beds. The rosemary was still there. I set up my chair beside it, and I sat. At first, it felt like theater, a last stand with no audience. But slowly, the night settled around me. A fox barked in the distance. The air smelled like soil and jasmine. I thought about the last time Grandma and I had sat under this tree. She'd made sun tea, poured over ice in jelly jars, and told me stories of how her parents used to host Sunday gatherings in this garden. Neighbors would bring pies. Kids would string up lanterns. No one locked their doors then. "You protect this place," she'd whispered that day, "because no one else will." Now I was doing exactly that. Alone, in the dark, with a heart full of fury and love. Around 11 p.m., a white van slowed near the curb. The driver leaned out the window. "You all right, miss?" I stood, brushing off my jeans. "I'm fine. Just watching over something important." He blinked at me, clearly confused, then drove off. It wasn't long after that I turned off the flashlight and curled up in the chair, jacket zipped tight, her letter pressed against my chest like armor. I didn't sleep much, maybe in fits, but I didn't leave either. I stayed. And somehow, in the thick of that quiet, I knew I'd crossed a line no one in my family expected me to cross. I wasn't backing down. The sky began to lighten around 5:30 a.m., brushing pink across the tops of the houses. Birds chirped like it was just another Tuesday. But this wasn't just another day. A construction truck rumbled to a stop around 6:15. 2 men climbed out, hard hats in hand, confusion creasing their faces when they spotted me. I stood, brushing leaves from my coat. "You're trespassing," I said, voice calm but steady. "This land is under dispute. The deed is in my name. I suggest you call your boss before lifting a finger." They didn't move closer. One made a call. The other stared at the cherry tree. "You're serious about this?" he asked. I looked him in the eye. "I slept in the garden." He nodded once, slowly. "All right." By 7:30, they left, and by noon, the story hit the local news. A neighbor must have snapped a picture of me in the lawn chair and sent it to the community paper. The headline was simple but punchy. "Granddaughter of local legend protests demolition, sleeps in garden to save family home." Within hours, the photo spread. Comments rolled in. People remembered Grandma, her spice cakes at church bake sales, her firm but kind lectures at the PTA, her open-door dinners for kids whose parents worked late shifts. And just like that, the garden wasn't just my fight anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd ever passed through it. I wasn't alone. And that terrified the people who'd signed the paperwork behind closed doors. But I didn't care, because I had roots in that soil. And now, the world was watching. By morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Unknown numbers, local reporters, old high school classmates I hadn't heard from in a decade, suddenly popping up in my DMs with words like, "So proud," and "Stay strong." It was surreal. The protest had gone viral, if you could call one woman in a folding chair viral. But there I was, captured in soft morning light, half asleep and clutching Grandma's letter like it could part seas. People connected with it, with her, with the idea that something worth saving wasn't made of glass towers and parking lots. The construction company issued a bland press statement. "We are reviewing all claims and pausing any demolition until ownership is fully resolved." That gave me time. By day 2, people began showing up. First, a woman named Carla, who brought a tray of lemon muffins and a folding stool. "Your grandma gave me her lasagna recipe when I was pregnant. Said it would put meat back on my bones. I just wanted to thank her, even if it's late." Then came Dave, an old man in overalls with a camera bag. "Mind if I document this? Feels like history in the making." By lunchtime, 5 lawn chairs circled the cherry tree like a modern campfire. People shared stories. Someone played soft acoustic guitar. A retired teacher read poems out loud. And I just listened. I sat in the dirt, where Grandma used to kneel in springtime, planting bulbs with muddy fingers and stubborn joy. I imagined her watching us, laughing softly. "Look at this mess. Isn't it beautiful?" Local news vans showed up that afternoon. One young reporter with striking glasses asked me to speak on camera. "I'm not trying to stop progress," I said, voice steady. "I'm trying to remind people that progress should never mean erasure." "What do you hope to gain?" "I already gained something," I said. I remembered who I come from. That quote made the evening news. By sunset, the front gate was lined with candles. Someone left wildflowers by the rosemary bush. And the cherry tree, it caught the golden light like it was glowing from inside. I should have been tired, but adrenaline held me steady until I got the call. It was Mr. Lamont. His voice, though always polite, carried a note of tension now. "We may have a problem." My heart froze. "What is it?" "The developer's legal team has filed a motion to challenge the deed. They're claiming the sale was made in good faith and without prior knowledge of your inheritance. But they didn't have the deed. That's the whole point." "Yes, but proving what they knew, and when, that's where things can get sticky." I closed my eyes, frustration rising. "How long do we have?" "They've asked for an expedited review. 48 hours. I thanked him and hung up, stomach twisting. The crowd was thinning as the sun dropped, a few kind souls lingering to pick up trash or stack chairs. Carla squeezed my hand before leaving. "We're not going anywhere, sweetheart. Whatever you need." I nodded, trying not to show the tremble in my jaw. Inside, the fear returned like a shadow at my back. Public support was strong, but money and influence didn't always care about sentiment. And if this challenge held in court, it could unravel everything. But then, as I folded Grandma's letter once more into its envelope, something new stirred inside me. Not just resolve, fire. They didn't know me, not really. They thought I was a grieving girl clinging to memories. What they didn't understand was that this fight, it wasn't about nostalgia, it was about belonging. And I wasn't giving up. Not when the cherry tree still stood, not when strangers had become shields, not when Grandma's voice still whispered through the roots. The third morning felt different. Hope has a strange texture when it starts to take root. Quiet, cautious, but impossible to ignore. I woke to the smell of fresh coffee. Someone had brought a full thermos and left it beside the rosemary bush with a sticky note that read, "Stay strong, M." The sun cut low across the garden, painting gold across the dew-touched petals. Despite the tension humming beneath the surface, something about the stillness felt sacred, like the garden itself was holding its breath. Then came the miracle. Dave, the old man with the camera bag, shuffled through the gate just after 8. His hat was crooked, and his hands trembled slightly. But he held a brown envelope like it was glass. "I found something," he said. I sat up straighter in the lawn chair. "What is it?" He opened the envelope and gently pulled out an old, grainy photograph. "That's your grandma," he said, tapping the image with a crooked finger, signing something on the porch. "That's Lamont beside her. And look here. See the bottom corner? That's the original deed. I took this maybe 6 years ago. Was working on a community photography project then, documenting old homes and traditions. Forgot I had it." The photo was slightly curled, edges soft from age, but the details were unmistakable. There she was, Grandma Eloise, in her lavender cardigan, seated with pen in hand, smiling just slightly as she leaned over a sheet of official paper. The embossed seal on the document shimmered faintly in the light, and next to it, in neat, looping script, was my name, Sarah Waverly. I stared at the photo, heart hammering. "You're sure about the date?" He nodded. Stamped it on the back. "April 19th, 6 years ago. And I've got the negatives." I blinked fast, fighting the sudden sting in my eyes. "Dave, this could change everything. You needed proof, didn't you?" he said, voice warm with pride. "Now, you've got it." By noon, Mr. Lamont had the photo scanned, time-stamped, and forwarded to his legal team. The image served as undeniable evidence. The deed wasn't a recent afterthought. It had been signed, sealed, and witnessed years before the sale. The media jumped on it within hours. "Photographic evidence surfaces. Historic Waverly deed signed years ago," read one headline. "Community rally bolsters woman's legal fight for grandmother's legacy," followed another. And just like that, the tide shifted. The construction company backpedaled. Their PR team issued a nervous-sounding statement about respecting emerging information and being sensitive to the community's connection to the property. But it was more than just their tone that changed. People started showing up with purpose now, not just sympathy. A group of architecture students volunteered to map the garden's original layout. A retired judge emailed her support, offering to write a formal statement. Even the town historian, a woman named Diane with a sharp voice and a softer heart, called to say she was digging through local archives for any mention of the Waverly home in city planning documents. And through it all, I kept thinking, "Grandma, you did this. You planted these seeds. You believed in beauty that couldn't be bulldozed." That night, as the sky deepened to indigo and candlelight flickered around the tree, I sat with the photograph in my lap. For the first time since I stepped off that plane, I felt like I was doing more than reacting. I was leading, not for likes or headlines or legacy, for her, for what she loved, and for the truth, finally taking root in a world that almost forgot how to listen. I should have known the quiet wouldn't last. Victory has a way of drawing shadows out of hiding. It started with a knock, not at the garden gate, but on the side door of the house next door. I was helping a volunteer group line the walkway with candles when someone called my name. She stood by the fence like she owned the land. Aunt Melanie. We hadn't spoken in years. The kind of silence that grows from polite distance into something colder, more permanent. She was Grandma's younger sister's daughter, technically my aunt, though she always felt more like a distant storm I'd learned to avoid. "I see you've stirred quite the drama," she said, arms folded in a way that made her diamond bracelet catch the last of the light. I blinked. "Melanie, what are you doing here?" She smiled, tight and brittle, claiming what's mine. For a moment I didn't understand. Then she pulled a folded paper from her bag. "I have a copy of Grandma's will, the one from 2011, before she got all whimsical about gardens and fairy tales. This one names me as joint heir." I felt the earth shift beneath me. "That's outdated," I said. "She signed a deed transfer. I have the photograph, the lawyer, the notarized documents. Doesn't mean the will isn't valid," she said sweetly. "And the courts will need to hear both sides." My stomach nodded. "Why now?" She tilted her head, and for a moment I saw something unguarded. Bitterness, maybe even pain. Because she always gave you everything. The summers, the attention, the stories, and now the land. While I, her actual niece, was left out like I didn't exist. "She didn't leave you out," I said quietly. She left you what she thought you'd protect. She left me the house. You think this is about a house? Her voice sharpened. This is about what it stands for. You, standing here like the patron saint of memory, while the rest of us were picking up the pieces she didn't romanticize. She left without saying goodbye. An hour later, a legal notice was slipped through the fence. Formal notification of a countersuit claiming joint ownership and requesting immediate injunction on restoration or occupation. I sat on the porch steps, numb, while the candle flames around the cherry tree flickered under the weight of the wind. She hadn't cared when Grandma was in hospice. She hadn't shown up at the funeral. But now she wanted the soil Grandma whispered her secrets into? I stared at the garden, throat burning. Why is it always family who knows just how to cut the deepest? Carla brought me tea. Someone handed me a blanket, but I didn't sleep that night. I walked the garden paths in the moonlight, whispering names of every plant, every memory, like a spell. Because when blood turns against you, you don't fight with fists. You fight with legacy, with truth, and with roots no lawsuit can sever. The air felt heavy the next morning, thick with pending rain and words left unsaid. As I sat beneath the cherry tree, with Grandma's letter folded in my lap, I could feel the momentum slowing, like the story had caught its breath and didn't quite know where to exhale next. That's when Mom showed up, not with her usual click of heels or sharp-edged voice. She came quietly, walking past the camera crews in candle rows, wearing the same gray cardigan she used to wear on grocery runs. Her hair was undone. Her hands were empty. She didn't speak at first, just stood at the edge of the garden like she wasn't sure she was allowed in. "You don't need permission," I said without looking up. She took a tentative step forward, then another. Finally, she sat beside me on the porch steps like it was still her home. We watched the wind stir the rosemary bush, neither of us saying much, until she finally sighed. "I didn't know about the deed," she said. "Not until yesterday. Your aunt's filing forced everything out into the open." I stayed quiet, waiting. She rubbed her fingers together like she was cold. "I should have told you sooner. About the debts. The house wasn't just falling apart, Sarah. It was bleeding money. We refinanced twice after your dad's layoff. Then the hospital bills. Your grandmother never told you how much she paid for my surgery, did she?" I turned to her slowly. "No. She emptied a retirement fund, told me not to say anything, said you had enough pressure, being the sensitive one." She laughed, short and dry. "You know what she meant by that?" I did, but it hurt anyway. "She loved you," I whispered. "I know," Mom said, voice cracking. "And I loved her. But love doesn't pay contractors or keep roofs from caving in. I thought selling the house would give us all a fresh start. I didn't realize how much of her was still rooted here." I looked at her for the first time in days. She didn't look like the cold strategist I'd imagined, just a tired woman who'd been fighting a battle in silence. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, softer now. She exhaled, long and broken. "Because I thought you'd hate me, and I couldn't handle being the villain in both your stories. I wanted to hold onto my anger, to clutch it like armor, but something cracked. Maybe it was her voice, or the way she stared at the cherry tree like it was speaking too. She gave you the garden because you would have fought for it," Mom said. "She gave me the debts because she knew I'd survive them." And there it was. Two kinds of love, two kinds of legacy. Neither easy, neither clean, just true. "She was trying to heal both of us in different ways," I said. Mom nodded. "But maybe she underestimated how tangled we really were." We sat in silence for a while after that. The cameras didn't matter. The lawsuits, the headlines, even the viral momentum, none of it felt real compared to this moment. Mother and daughter, sitting on soil neither of us fully owned, but both had bled for. The rain began softly, misting the air, clinging to the petals like dew. And I realized this wasn't about restoring a house anymore. It was about restoring something far more fragile. Us. 2 weeks later, we sat in the conference room of a modest mediation center, surrounded by gray walls and even grayer expressions. Aunt Melanie was seated across from me, perfectly poised, her lips painted in a too bright red that felt more like armor than decoration. Mom sat beside her, uncharacteristically quiet, her hands twisted a tissue in her lap. I hadn't seen her cry, not even at Grandma's funeral, but her fingers told a different story now. My seat was closest to the window. I watched the wind stir the trees outside and imagined I was still under the cherry tree, letting the sky speak for me. The mediator, a soft-spoken man named Henry, cleared his throat. "Let's begin," he said, voice like warm gravel. They'd already gone over the documents, the deed with Grandma's signature, the photograph, the dated witness statements, the outdated will Aunt Melanie had clung to like a lifeline. It was all valid, and yet we were still here, because legality isn't always enough to mend what inheritance tears apart. I'd spent nights pacing, scribbling arguments, trying to calculate what was worth keeping and what was worth surrendering. And when Henry finally turned to me, I didn't reach for my notes, I just spoke. "She gave me the house because she trusted I'd protect it," I said. "But she didn't leave this mess behind to watch us destroy each other." Aunt Melanie smirked. "Spare me the poetry. She gave you memories too," I said, gentler now. "Maybe not on paper, but you spent summers here. You knew what the garden meant. You know?" She didn't answer. I turned to the mediator. "I'm willing to forfeit any cash inheritance. If it still exists, all I want is full ownership of the house and land." Mom's breath hitched beside me. Henry blinked. "You're sure?" I nodded. "I don't want to fight my family. I want to restore something. If money is the issue, take it. Just leave me the roots." There was a long pause. Aunt Melanie studied me like she was seeing me differently for the first time, not as a girl with nostalgia, but as a woman making peace. Finally, she looked away. "Fine." Just like that. One word, and it was over. Not in triumph, not in victory, in release. The papers were signed that day. I gave up any residual funds from Grandma's estate, what little was left after debts and expenses. Aunt Melanie got to save face. Mom quietly withdrew her own objections, her signature the last to mark the line. We left the building under a pale sky. I didn't feel euphoric, just free. Later that evening, I sat beneath the cherry tree with the official deed in my hands, this time with no one to question it, no threat to the soil. Carla brought lemonade. Dave snapped one final photo, me, barefoot, smiling softly, pen in hand, signing something beneath the same branches Grandma had sat under years ago. No ceremony, no applause, just truth made whole. The garden was mine, but the question still clung in the quiet. What would I do now that peace had come at a price? And could we ever rebuild the family that fractured in its shadow? It wasn't the formal apology I expected. There was no grand speech, no tears or desperate embraces. Just a knock on the side of the garden gate at dusk, where the last light clung to the cherry blossoms like they were reluctant to say goodbye to the day. Aunt Melanie stood there holding a clay pot. Inside it, a single violet hyacinth, barely blooming. It was Grandma's favorite, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. Figured I'd bring something that mattered. I took the pot, the cool ceramic grounding my hands. "I remember," I said softly. She used to tuck the bulbs in socks until April. A breath of a smile crossed her face. "Because they liked the dark first. Said you can't rush a good bloom." We stood in silence for a while, the kind that wasn't angry anymore, just tired. She finally spoke again. "I was wrong. About the will. About you. I let jealousy make me forget who she was. Who you are." I studied her for a moment, trying to recognize the woman beneath the bitterness that had once felt permanent. And what I saw instead was regret, raw and fragile. "She loved you," I said. "Maybe she just didn't know how to show it equally. Maybe I didn't either." Melanie glanced down at the garden. "This place, it was always magic, even when I was too busy resenting you to see it. Maybe it still can be," I offered. Not because I owed her peace, but because I had finally found my own. She nodded. "I'm not asking to be part of whatever you're building. Just don't forget she belonged to all of us, even the broken parts." "I won't," I whispered. When she left, she didn't hug me, but she placed one hand gently on the garden's fence before walking away. And somehow that said more than words. Mom came the next morning. No coffee in hand, no apology rehearsed, just a folded photo, a snapshot from the late 90s. Grandma in the kitchen, laughing, mid-pour, with a jug of sweet tea. Mom beside her, much younger, head tilted, in a rare moment of unguarded joy. "She made me feel like I could still be good," Mom said, voice brittle, "even when I was angry, even when I failed." I looked at her carefully. "Is that why you sold the house? Because you thought you already failed?" She nodded once. "I thought if I buried it fast enough, I wouldn't have to face how much I'd lost." "I needed you to fight for it," I said, throat tight. "I know," she whispered, "but I didn't know how. Not the way you do." I placed the photo inside my journal, beside Grandma's letter. Mom's fingers brushed my shoulder as she stood. It was brief, awkward, but real. And as she walked back through the rosemary gate, I understood something. Apologies don't fix everything, but they clear space for something new, something possible. And that was enough, because even fractured roots can bloom again if you water them right. 6 months later, the walls echoed with a different kind of noise. Laughter, footsteps, pages turning, children sitting cross-legged in what used to be the living room, now filled with shelves of donated books. Volunteers, retirees, high schoolers, even former doubters. Painted signs, planted herbs, swept porches. The Waverly House was no longer just a memory. It was becoming something alive, a community library, a memorial garden, a place for stories, just like Grandma always wanted. I kept her photo on the check-in desk. Not a framed portrait, just that same worn picture of her signing the deed. Laminated now, with a small plaque beneath, "Legacy is not what you leave behind. It's what you plant in others." Every Saturday, the garden came to life. Children traced their fingers along the brick path, lined with names of donors and neighbors. I'd catch people pausing at the rosemary bush, breathing in deeply like it carried someone they'd lost. Maybe it did. The cherry tree stood taller now, branches trimmed and healthy. Carla had painted a swing in cheerful blues. Dave installed a wooden bench with carved lines from one of Grandma's favorite poems. And I found my rhythm. Morning tea with the volunteers, late evenings cataloging books, quiet afternoons reading to kids under the tree. Yet even in the peace, a question lingered. Could this really replace what we lost? Could this healing, public and warm, mend the private wounds still threading through my family? Mom came by once a week now, always with something in her hands. A pie, a thrifted lamp, seedlings wrapped in newspaper. She never stayed long, just enough to check in, to nod at the tree, to place something quietly in a corner. But each time, her presence lasted longer. Aunt Melanie sent a letter, a real one, written in careful ink. "You were right to fight. I wasn't angry at you. I was angry that I didn't. If you'll have me, I'd like to donate my time. Grant writing, maybe. I used to be good at that. I'd like to be useful now." I smiled when I read it. Maybe some families don't tie back together in one clean knot. Maybe they braid loosely, slowly, forgivingly. The night before the official reopening, I walked the garden alone. No candles, no crowd, just the moonlight and the scent of hyacinth, stubborn and sweet. I sat under the cherry tree with Grandma's letter one last time. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. She was here, in the swing, in the soil, in the quiet persistence of the rosemary. And in me, the girl who came home to honor a promise. The woman who stayed to build something bigger. Not everyone gets closure. Not everyone gets peace. But I got both. In petals and pages and people who remembered. And maybe that's the real ending. Not a grand finale, but a garden that keeps growing. One story at a time. If this were your grandmother's legacy, would you have fought for it? Tell me in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, share it with someone who still believes in the power of memory.